There were two nightmares. I mean, one was we wouldn't have enough ventilators. I'm the physician-in-chief here, and my patients would die. That was the first problem. And urgency number two is that we wouldn't have enough of this stuff because we were in short supply and we were running through it really quickly. And so I would be sending my people in to situations where they were going to get infected.
We are sort of whistling in the wind here. There is a darkness coming over us. As it was in China, it's just sort of like building and building, kind of trying to ignore what was right in front of all of our faces, right? Oh, you know, because, you know, we all live, I mean, H1N1, Zika, but you always felt like it was somewhere else. I was terrified. When we started getting involved in the response, it got a little bit less scary and became more like a roll up our sleeves and get something done type thing.
And I think what coronavirus has taught us is the supply chain is fragile, but we do need to have certain few supplies, I think, stockpiled, just knowing that these are things we're going to need because it's inevitable.
The mask order that we talked about was taken from us. The mask order reached New York and then I don't know where it went, but didn't come to us. And so suddenly we realized, you know, at one level, if we make it in Massachusetts, then interstate commerce does not apply, and therefore it can't disappear. The Constitution is pretty clear about that.
Massachusetts was an early hotspot during the first wave of the novel coronavirus pandemic in the spring of 2020. As case counts surged across the Commonwealth, critical testing and personal protective equipment for frontline workers was in short supply, forcing hospitals and healthcare systems to take desperate action to secure life-saving products during a time of unprecedented need. This is the story of a municipal and industry response to an evolving national crisis, and perhaps a reflection of the possibility for the future of American advanced manufacturing and essential supply chains.
The number of reported cases, as everybody knows, has seen a significant uptick in the United States and in Massachusetts, and state health officials are closely monitoring and tracing presumptive positive cases, and this concludes the 7 cases people know about that are here in Berkshire County.
It was a call on the weekend, I think it was March 7th, we got the phone call that we were opening up our command center and that we had our first COVID positive patients. And it happened to be the first COVID positive patient in the Commonwealth that was admitted to a hospital. So in Massachusetts, you know, we had the Biogen outbreak that came from a conference in Boston. Somehow there was real community spread occurring in Berkshire County. No one knew how it got here, but it was here.
It's not until the NBA cancels their season on March 11th that Corona or COVID crosses the chasm into full-blown, you know, holy crap moment. And then March 13th, they pull the plug. You know, no more school. So when school gets canceled, right, then we all know. And then the March 13th, I remember that night, Brookline Public Schools said 2 weeks. Marty Walsh said 4 weeks. I looked at my wife, I said, why do I feel like it's 9:30 a.m. on September 11th right now?
Back in March, I started realizing that we were living through a historic period. Of course, people were terrified because nobody knew what it was. It reminded me of the early days of HIV, where we were wearing moon suits to go in and see patients.
We've seen this kind of disease emergence before with influenza, and it was just a matter of time that we would see something more significant. This one gave hints back in the early 2000s when it was SARS, and gave hints a few years later when it was MERS. And now it's a coronavirus unique unto itself, and it was better able to establish itself and cause problems.
Like, we're in trouble. The truth was that the supply chain for N95s was basically locked down. I texted Joe Kennedy and I just said, I said, I got really bad news about these masks. Like, remember those masks I said we could get? Like, supply is locked up in China. This is going to be way harder than we think. We can't just get this stuff rolling. It's going to be way more complicated. Not very confident. And he just texts me back, oof.
There was no roadmap. And it felt like every day you were drinking from a fire hose and the rules would change. And the PPE is what is keeping us safe. How we view COVID and how we manage COVID would be significantly different if we had an adequate supply of PPE and testing.
You get to see the data around the virus and the numbers creeping up in that mid-March timeframe. And that led the governor to declare the state of emergency, led the governor to create this COVID command center, which is the focal point for all of our efforts in the administration to fight the virus and trying to avoid a situation where the healthcare system could become overwhelmed by the virus numbers. But it also led us to realize we needed a lot more supplies. We needed more supplies for our frontline workers, our healthcare workers, our first responders who are going to be active on the front lines of this.
Really taking care of the people who are taking care of the patients has become a real important thing. And it really created more of a sense of urgency around the PPE, because how could you ask somebody to go in and do that if you weren't able to protect them? And I mean, I know some people have had to resort to, kind of jerry-rig things, you hear of people wearing trash bags. It's just, for years and years, the supply chain had become globalized based almost entirely on efficiency. And of course, because of government subsidies and a planned economy, China essentially cornered the market in these N95 respirators, the various gowns, et cetera. And because they were having these explosive epidemics, they essentially shut down exports. On a typical day, the supply chain is a quiet little area. It swelled to over 25 people working the phones 24/7, calling sometimes some shady characters.
Where's Rosie the Riveter when you need her? We can't afford to fall short. But I don't want our staffs or our patients to have to feel unprotected. You start off with that, you might as well hang it up. You're not going to get to the next level of being able to provide the care. We jumped on anything we needed to supply and oversupply where appropriate, given all the uncertainties at the time. Whether it's this pandemic or other issues in the future, we need to have a better approach to supporting the healthcare of our communities.
The notion of the federal stockpile was it's supposed to be our stockpile. It's not supposed to be state stockpiles that they then use. So we're encouraging
the absence of a coherent federal response and the fragility of global supply lines was exacerbating a crisis that had only just begun. State governments were operating in uncharted territory, scrambling to fend for themselves against neighboring states and the federal government, in a quest to secure essential masks, gowns, and face shields to protect their frontline workers.
The prices were being bid up 5 to 10 times for N95 respirators. It was getting quite contentious because we were beginning to think that, geez, maybe everybody taking care of a COVID patient ought to have one of these. And we were running quite short. We had only a few days of supply. We were told that if we could come to a loading dock in New Jersey with $3 million in hand, we could have access to several million of these, I believe about 2 to 3 million. Mass Mutual allowed us to use their corporate jet, and we sent our chief physician down because we wanted to test these things before we bought them. Dr. Artenstein got down there to this loading dock in southern New Jersey outside the Philadelphia airport, only to be met by the FBI and Homeland Security, who wanted to interdict the supplies and bring them back to the federal stockpile. And there was this standoff that went on for about 2 hours because we had paid for the stuff, we had tested the stuff, et cetera. And I ended up calling Congressman Neal, who's the chairman of Ways and Means and our local congressman, who had contacts at Homeland Security. And through his chief of staff, we got these guys to stand down and give us our supplies. We had worked with a trucking company, which conveniently had sent a couple of trailer trucks, semi-trucks, that were labeled as food supplies or food distribution. Because we knew that the state police were monitoring the borders at New Jersey and New York. They took back roads up through Pennsylvania, et cetera, and it took them like 8 hours to get back to Springfield. And this incredible story was picked up by the LA Times, CNN, et cetera. And that was just one story.
The state of Massachusetts is home to world-class academic institutions and healthcare systems. The city of Boston brims with companies on the cutting edge of biotech and medtech research and solutions. And the supporting manufacturing base stretches the breadth of the state, creating an ecosystem uniquely equipped to adapt and respond to the crisis. State government leaders acted quickly, establishing the Massachusetts Emergency Response Team, consisting of experts from healthcare, academia, and industry, to stand up domestic supply lines of PPE and essential products.
M-ERT really came about through our Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative, as we all were seeing the shortage of personal protective equipment, or PPE, and realizing that the efforts to source some of this material may not result in sufficient supply. A few of us asked, what can our manufacturers do? And the thought that if you could encourage Massachusetts manufacturers to repurpose their production lines and actually make more of this stuff, that could help us.
So as this cascading crisis happened, our phone just started ringing off the hook. Put out an email to about 35 people. 50 people showed up on the Zoom call, and we said we need a manufacturing response to this crisis.
I think we're quite fortunate here in Massachusetts. We have world-class health systems. We have world-class academic centers and companies with a lot of technical expertise. And we have a lot of manufacturing capability that exists. We were able to activate all of that in parallel very quickly.
The willingness and the breadth of technical capability is unique and was a big part of us being able to successfully ramp up and pivot so many companies to help out.
And the command center was sort of the superstructure of the state overseeing the entire response. And there was a PPE team. So I was able to carry that list of priority items into the manufacturing emergency response team, or the M-ERT as it became known, and say, okay, this is the priority PPE.
I came into the group with white heat on these topics. And, to their credit, Carolyn and Ben and Hader and all the other folks, they channel things. We got to high priorities. They initially, none of them had any knowledge of the medical situation. I had no clue as to who these people were and what they were able to do or anything else. So the early calls were about, well, okay, this is what droplet precautions are. This is what aerosol is. As far as we know, this is droplets. So let me tell you what, when I take care of patients and they've got the flu and I've got droplet precautions, gown, mask, gloves, obviously hand hygiene gloves, and I don't get the flu. Okay, so clearly that works.
It was crystal clear with the M-ERT and what we were trying to do, what our mission was. And so it wasn't like we spent 2 weeks, what's our mission statement? It was like 2 minutes, here's what we're doing. Everybody's on the same page. How can I help? Let's go. I think the M-ERT was doing a great job of sort of being the super node of information, and brokering information and getting it to people at the right time who needed it. And some of the products were easier to develop more quickly. Face shields, we had a lot of manufacturers that pivoted early on. General use face masks. Isolation gowns, I would say, was a big need that we were driving on.
Some of us who were on literally multiple calls every day, right? Just trying to understand what a company had and figuring out who could we connect them to in order to help them to contribute to some particular area. We realized, I think, early on that a role that we could help with is on the testing side, because a lot of the companies that were looking to pivot to making PPEs hadn't done it. And so they didn't know, how do I meet this certification?
We were rapidly getting into FDA emergency use authorization territory, having to evaluate products and having to know what they would do. So the fact that the testing came up so that they could test the masks, they could test the gowns and everything else, allowed us to buy with assurance that we were getting what we thought we were getting. And then we could tell our people that there was assurance.
So it was really about the whole, every aspect of manufacturing, designing the product, testing it, clearing the regulatory hurdles, training employees was part of it as well, and figuring out the demand side of the equation too. And it all just came together in a pretty amazing way.
And they've produced over 5 million pieces of PPE to date, and they've gotten all the approvals that they've needed from the FDA, and they've been able to do all of the things that are necessary. And these are medical supplies, so there's some pretty high bars that have to be met for some of these items. So some of these companies will stay in this business.
The idea that we didn't have swabs, and there's two factories, one's in China and one's in Italy, for nasopharyngeal swabs. That was it when we started. So we have to have a domestic supply chain. So if this mask is a penny and it's 2 cents, that isn't going to have a huge impact on what we're doing, and we can learn how to make it for less and make it in this country. We can do 3D printing, we can do many things.
We're known for biotech, we're known for software, we're known for finance, we're known for a lot of things. We make stuff here in Massachusetts. And I think we're learning more and more what we're capable of doing. And certainly the M-ERT process has caused us to learn a lot about that.
What we did as a community, healthcare community, when we finally came together was remarkable. The first level of the crisis, reacting to the punch. What I, wonder is what long-term societal changes this creates.
This region started with had manufacturing with the water wheels. I know the history here pretty well. Water wheels, then steam, and mills up in Lawrence and Lowell and elsewhere. And the work was hard, but they paid people, and they earned a living wage. It was better than being on the farm. And it was certainly better than going out to sea and whaling. The economy here has always depended on continuing innovation. It's always been the case.
The possibility of advanced manufacturing is accelerating in response to the coronavirus crisis. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, synergy between state government and the healthcare and manufacturing industries has brought to bear a real-time case study of the inherent challenges and benefits to restoring the balance of domestic supply lines. As the impact of the pandemic continues to unfold, a statewide response to the crisis has been mobilized to protect the health and well-being of our workers and our communities. This is Project Frontline.